Hey, welcome to another episode of the Mark Moss Show, where we talk about the decentralized revolution. We talk about the way the world is changing right before our very eyes as we're swinging from centralization to decentralization. Of course, we're talking about Bitcoin and how that changes the world. I try to bring to you some education to change the way you think. I try to bring to you the latest breaking news each and every week so you stay on top of this revolution as it's happening play by play. And of course, bring to you some of my friends so you can hear some other opinions, but just besides just me. And that's what we got for you right now. I'm in the studio with my good friend Aleks Svetski. He's also the co-author of my new book that we just released this week on Amazon. The title of the book is called The UnCommunist Manifesto. Welcome, Aleks. Thanks for joining me today.
Mark, thanks for having me back, buddy. I think I'm one of these recurring guests, this like recurring nightmare that doesn't leave you alone. I'm back.
Well, I guess it depends on which way you view. For many, it's a pleasure, and for many, maybe it is that nightmare. But so something we've been talking about for a while now, and I'm just so excited, is we got this new book that we wrote, and it is out. It's on Amazon. Again, it's The UnCommunist Manifesto. It was released on Monday. We've already reached bestseller status, so pretty excited about that. Exciting, right? My first book. Is this your first book? I think it is, right?
Yeah, we've both broken our virginity, so this is a first time for each of us. And man, I think we hit bestseller in 2-hour political reads. We hit bestseller in economic theory for about a day there, and there was one other category. So we hit bestseller in a couple categories pretty quickly, which was good to see. And it's doing well. There's sales every single day, so we're just sort of seeing that book spread, and this is over and above what we obviously did on the Kickstarter program about, I think, 3-4 months ago. So yeah, I really want to see this message spread far and wide. It's not about the sales; it's more about the message getting out there, because I think we've captured the zeitgeist of the time in this book.
Yeah. So that first category, the 2-hour read, it's an interesting category. I really like it, though. I know something that you and I have talked about a lot. Most books today, I guess it's a symptom of short attention spans or whatever. But these big books, which are great, a lot of times they're overwhelming. They're hard to read, and there's a need for them. They're great, but a lot of the great books of history are actually just very short. And so this book's about 10,000 words. Most people could read it about an hour and a half. So I think that's important for us, because if we want enough people to read it, we need to make it easy to read, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something to be said about delivering a couple good ideas really concisely. So if you look at the classics like, Machiavelli, right? Niccolo Machiavelli, The Prince, really short book. Mm-hmm. The Art of War, really short book. Balthazar Gracian's, book on, becoming the best version of yourself and winning at life. It was a short book. I mean, the Communist Manifesto was a short book, despite how ridiculous it was. The Law by Frederick Bastiat, short book, easy 1-hour read. So there is something to be said about a good idea, or a good couple of ideas that can be concisely presented in something that is digestible in an hour or two. And I think we've done a good job here. There's, I think, 4 good solid ideas in the book that people can read, they can take away, and I hope it helps them kind of place a new lens in the way they view the world. And I think
let's talk through those 4 big ideas. Let's start with the first one. What would you say one of the first big ideas is with the book?
Well, the first one is how we open the book. So Marx opens his book suggesting that the struggle of all of human history has been the struggle between the oppressor and the oppressed. And he just arbitrarily states that the new version of the oppressor and the oppressed is the propertied people, so the bourgeoisie, versus the unpropertied people, so the workers, the proletariat. And it's such a vague, arbitrary definition of rich versus poor. And what we sort of come out the gates with is no. The struggle has always existed amongst all sorts of different classes. I mean, the struggle exists between your morning self and your afternoon self, between what you want to do with work. It exists with your friends, your family, and everyone. So we suggest that there's probably 2 ideas here. One is that the struggle is between the collective and this sort of coercive nature of the madness of crowds, and the individual who wants to claim autonomy and be sovereign and assert his will. So that's kind of one axis of the struggle. And then the other one is what I would think is the deeper struggle in living life and attaining any form of wealth or resources, which is the choice between acquiring said resources through cooperative means or through coercive means. Or another way to put that, through economic means, which is the cooperative method, or through political means, which is the coercive method. And I think that is sort of like one of the first things we come out the gate with, is that that's the real struggle. Like, it's not about, one group versus another. It's about, do you move forward in life by beating someone over the head and taking their stuff, or do you cooperate with them? And that's
so is that is that regardless of what other class they may be in? So he arbitrarily defines two different classes, rich and poor. Today, cultural Marxism says we're all pitted against each other, different races, sexes, genders, etc. But then are you saying that regardless of which class or which identity you fall within, you can still decide whether you want to be collaborative or coercive, if you want to work with each other or not?
Well, let's think about it. So, one of the beauties of economics is that historically, anthropologically, biologically speaking, we humans have always formed some sort of tribe, and we've got like an in-group and an out-group. And traditionally, the way we've dealt with in-groups and out-groups is that we have quite animosity. We have enmity with people in the out-group, and we have some sort of homogeneity and, more communal relationship with people in the in-group. And you need that sort of variation because not everyone's the same. We have different values, we have different likes and desires, etc. Now, what economics allows us to do, what trade, what cooperation allows us to do, is we can actually maintain these in-groups, we can maintain some homogeneity, but we can cooperate, we can trade with people that we may not like, that we may not want to be in the same group with. And we can also live as more multidimensional beings, meaning that we can be part of all sorts of different groups. And when we need something from another group, exactly. When we need something from someone else, we just trade, we cooperate. And that's like a pillar of, a functional civilization versus going and just taking other people's stuff because you think you deserve it.
Yeah, like, I have, like, my friends I surf with, and, like, that's a whole culture on its own, and, like, if you're either in or you're out on that surf culture, that's, like, pretty deep to get into that, and you're either on the outside or you're on the inside of that, but then, like, I have different friends that I might go ride mountain bikes with, and then I have a different set of friends that I go ride dirt bikes with. They're a little bit more open, not as tight-knit as the surfer group, but they're a completely different group of people. But I want to align with the motocross people. I want to align with the surf people. Then I have, like, my business friends. So, like, we have, like, the Bitcoin crowd, and I have all my Bitcoin people, and we'll go hang out with them. And those are just different groups, and I could align with any one of them, but I don't want to be static and stuck in any one of those groups either.
Yeah, totally.
Kind of like that, right?
I think so. That malleability or that transmutability is important, and this is why identity politics doesn't work, because what happens is and this is probably another big idea of the book, and this is maybe not a unique idea, but it's that one must define an individual by their individual behavior, not the skin color, tone, or supposed group that they're in, and then blanket extend that to the individual themselves, because that, number one, it's unfair on the individual, but number two, it's just false. It's just not how it works. Yeah. I want to explore how this fits into maybe some of the what I talk about on the radio, which is this decentralized revolution. So this is obviously it's a centralizing theory of Marxism, and I think we're pushing back on individualism, which is more of a decentralizing theory. So, Aleks, one thing that I've seen, I just did this big video on my YouTube channel, and I talked about how these ESG narratives are nothing new, and how the attack we've seen on Sri Lanka with the farmers and fertilizer specifically in the farmland, and now it's in Holland, and now even Justin Trudeau in Canada, and it's the same thing. And then I showed how the same thing happened in Stalin when he attacked the farmers and took away their ability to grow food, and the same thing with Mao. And you always attack the farmers and take away their food, and then what happens? People starve to death. And I get all these comments, and they're saying, yeah, but you have a misunderstanding of socialism and communism.
You're talking about communism, you're not talking about socialism, and they want to go into that type of I'm like, look, man, communism, socialism, fascism, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same to me. Collectivism. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's all a centralizing tendency. Now, you look at where does centralization work, and it's a function of scale. In the home, you have, like, the father is the centralizing force. He is the breadwinner, the prime property owner, and within his domain, he has the perfect right to tell his children, what to do, what they can't do, etc., particularly when they're growing up. Now, as the children become adults, the onus starts to fall on them to become the decision makers of their own lives and then take their life outside of that domain, right? Now, centralization sort of implies that the constituents that you're managing don't have the maturity to make decisions on their own. And this is one of the big takeaways of whether it's socialism, communism, or all of them, that they're all predicated on this idea that without some sort of authority in the middle, you people would die of starvation. Like, it kind of, and Frederick Bastiat talks about this in his book, is like the bureaucrats or the politicos out there just have this sense that if they didn't grow the food, we would somehow all die of starvation. Like, if they didn't tell us what to wear, like, we would all be running around naked. If they didn't, tell us to build houses and, build regulations for that stuff, we would somehow be living out in
we
the
see it
fields.
even today, where it's all these people that are like, well, if the government doesn't tax us and steal our money, who's going to help the poor? Who's going to help the less fortunate? Same thing, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's like, we never. I think it's tied to just I think it's a pathology of the person, right? So people who, and you've used this example before, it's like someone who wouldn't help a poor person themselves then projects that on the rest of the world and assumes that no one would. Also, people who lack self-discipline and self-control, like you look at these people, the Carsten guy from the Bank of International Settlements, like he's a physical example of lack of self-control. And they project this own internal inability to maintain and manage their own lives on everybody else. So then they try and impose control. So they have this very low faith or belief in the intelligence, the capability, and the ingenuity of the human species in general. So they believe they're morons, everyone's a moron, so we need to build a pig pen, essentially, and cattle them all in. It's ridiculous.
I think there's some truth to that, though, right? So the majority of people don't think through these things and maybe can't make the best decisions, but that doesn't mean we should force them to. I think maybe it's through, like, influence. So influence, I made the statement before, like influence versus power. So, like, I could be in the best shape in the world, and I could be living that as an example. And anybody who would like to model what I've done with my physical fitness, for example, hey, here's my plan, and you're welcome to have it. But I'm not forcing anybody to participate in that. So I think that's influence. But then if we go a little bit further, so then you talked about, like, in a household. So then a little bit further, let's say that I started a new community. And I said, well, anybody that's in this community, I want them to be athletes, because we get together on weekends and we do sporting events or whatever. And then so I could control maybe this one area, but I'm not forcing anybody, because people could willingly opt into that, but then they could also opt out of that at the same time. So if it's done on a smaller scale, then you think it's okay if people are able to opt out?
Influence is an interesting thing. We're always influencing someone. I think leaders particularly are defined by having a greater influence over more people than non-leaders, right? I think that, like, if we had to really distill what the definition of a leader is, that's what it is. It's someone who shows by example and has influence over others. And
they say the best leaders lead from behind. They lead by example.
You mean
right?
in front?
Not by
lead from the front?
No, well, from behind, right? Leading by example, like by being the servant, right? I mean, if you look at in front, whatever you want to call it, but not from on top, but maybe side by side, right? So even if you look at look throughout history, like the king would typically go into battle with the people, right? So whatever you want to call it, and I guess they would kind of lead from behind, but what I meant is by example, as opposed to by decree.
Correct. And that example piece, I mean, that ties into ideas like skin in the game, etc., is that it's not making a decision and enforcing something on somebody else. Like, I just saw a video clip that came out about the guy, and I don't even know if I should mention this, but it's the World Economic not the World Economic Forum, but the World Health Organization. Who's the Ethiopian leader?
Tedros.
Yeah, that's it. And they literally just asked him, they're like, have you taken your dose yet? And his response was that I'm Ethiopian, I come from a poor country, and because it's not available there yet, I've decided not to. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, jeez.
But that's leading by non-example, right? And that's not leading. That is literally decree. That is literally what we know deep down is fake and fraudulent. But that's sort of how the power structures are arranged at the moment.
Yeah, crazy. One thing that one thing that I'm encouraged for this book, and I think the point we gave it is actually, as a matter of fact, just today, based off of that video I put out the other day. So I was talking to somebody who came into my DMs, and they were saying they were talking to somebody about communism, and they were completely shocked, and they were asking for some talking points of what they could say to them. I haven't responded to them yet, but maybe we could talk through some of that stuff when we get back. People who they hear people saying that, oh, Marxism or communism is so great, and maybe they think it's not, but they're not really sure why it's not or how to respond to that. And I think this book, the goal is to kind of wake people up to better ideas and give them some of that. But what would you say to somebody who's like asking some questions like that?
Well, I think there's a couple things that people who try and assert communism and socialism as a good idea generally cling to. And one that came to mind as we were talking, and I'm just going to give it a name, I'm going to call it the Star Trek syndrome. Okay. Is this fantasy that somehow technological evolution is going to transform everything and we'll come to this utopian version of the future where we don't need money anymore. Like, why would you need money when you have that, what's that, the replicator, right, in Star Trek? You put anything in there and it creates it for you. And what that sort of utopian dream fails to realize is that there's a pesky little thing called time. And time flows unidirectionally, like it flows forward. And that's the one thing you can't stop, pause, rewind, at least not for the next 100,000 years. Maybe we'll figure out teleportation one day, but that's a very different world. So for now, for the next 100,000 years, let's just assume that time is fixed and finite and it's moving in a certain direction. And as a result, we are going to need to prioritize things. So even if we could, let's say in the next 100 years, create the replicator, for the next 99,000 years beyond that, 99,900 years, we're still going to have the issue of time. So we're still, even if we had complete abundance of energy and materials, we would still need to order things in some sense. So we'd still need to have a time preference.
Prioritize.
Correct.
Prioritize, yeah.
This is, once again, why the existence of something like money is necessary. Like the technology of money enables us to prioritize. And how do we utilize that technology? Well, we utilize it as a means to get information in the marketplace, which is prices. And the only way to do that is to enable the information flow to occur freely. Communism wants to do away with all of that, do away with prices, set everything stagnant, and create this perfectly engineered closed system that doesn't involve prices, economics, and all of this. They're living in a fantasy land. They think that we can live outside of the bounds of time. Never going to happen. It just doesn't work like that. So the very premises, and I think this sort of, whether you read Marx's work or whether you read any socialist, communist people that have come after him, they all seem to basically be these utopians that think that we can somehow escape the physical constraints of reality and live outside of these these very real bounds, and they don't work. So everything kind of stems then down from there. It's like, whether it's the stupid ideas like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer somehow in capitalism, we need communism to fix that. Like, everything else starts to break down, which we can dig into those, but I think that's the first point, is that they're utopian and they don't understand that time's always going to be here, and we have to contend with that somehow.
I think just right off the bat, the utopian, there's no such thing as that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because what my idea of utopia isn't your idea of utopia, maybe. So, like, what I want is utopia you hate, for example. Like, I might want, my idea of utopia might be on a beautiful beach with like huge surf, but a lot of people hate the beach, and that would be hell for them to be on the beach, right? Or for example. So, right off the bat, we just know that, and I think what that right there highlights is back to the individual versus the collective. I might love the beach, you might hate it, and so if we assume that we're all the same, you're a fallacy right off the bat. Mm-hmm. I saw this morning, it's a little bit on a different subject, but back to kind of like these laws of the universe. There was a cryptocurrency, a game called Axie Infinity. I don't know if you heard of that, Axie Infinity. It got really popular last year, and in this brand new category called play to earn. Mm-hmm. And basically you play games and you earn money, you earn cryptocurrency. So I could, in this game, I go mine for gold, for example. So I got to buy picks and shovels. I earn them by playing, and then I take the picks and shovels and I can go earn gold, and then I earn these tokens, these cryptocurrency tokens, and then I can go exchange those cryptocurrency tokens for money, like on exchange. And they cracked the code, and this Axie Infinity, it blew up, and the game got so popular. And then in like the Philippines or wherever, they were like hiring teams to start spending time playing video games to earn money. And all these VCs put all this money into the game, and they finally found a way where people can get paid for their time playing games. Wow. How cool. Well, it worked out pretty good for a year until the Ponzi scheme ran out, and now there's no money to pay any of these people, and the whole thing has fallen apart. And I was like, of course it did. I've been seeing this the whole time, because they're like, but people finally were getting paid for their time playing games, but nobody values that. Nobody's going to pay them. So, like, they were earning money in the game, but it was being pumped in by VCs, and VCs, I mean, it raised whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars from some of these top firms, A16 or whatever, right?
What's wrong with these people?
And it's like, how far is that from reality? Like, but yet we're continuing to being plagued by that in real time, it seems like.
Well, I mean, that last bit, real time. So the reality today is not too far off from that game. You got these politicians who basically sit there.
No, that's my point.
They play pretend. It's like, just change the number here, and put a signature there, and I'll say this and make this promise here, and like all of it is just like one big magic show. It's like a Las Vegas show, and or a game. In the Philippines, and nothing really matters. It's not real. And I've just finished the new article that I'm writing for this year's edition of the Bitcoin Times. It's going to be the Austrian edition, and I talk about how Bitcoin is the thing that makes Austrian economics possible in a practical sense, not just a theoretical sense. And in there I talk about like the communist ideas are much like the Keynesian ideas, in that they're based on this premise of first of all, like entropy. Like, remember, Keynesian was like, it doesn't matter because in the long run we're all dead anyway, right? Communism is academic justification for entropy. They're all kind of all anti-life modalities of thinking. And it's like, it doesn't matter, just like, let's just burn it all up, let's use it now, and who cares? And just change the ledger, change the score, print a little bit more money, write a new regulation and pretend it didn't happen. Sweep it under the rug.
And all based off of a premise of getting something for nothing.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And that just doesn't work in the universe. Sorry, there's no, like, the second law of thermodynamics holds, irrespective of what politicians want to think.
Yeah, and all of nature that's not humans knows that. I read a thing, I think it was just last week, and it's like the gazelle wakes up every morning knowing if it doesn't run faster than the fastest lion, it's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And the lion wakes up in the morning knowing if it doesn't run faster than the slowest gazelle, it's dead. And nature knows that, right? Ants save up for the winter. We can see ants in the Bible. It says, we can even learn lessons from the ant, you sluggard. Like, look how it stores its food for the winter. You know, so the all the world knows that, but somehow humans think we can continually cheat that. But we're continuing to come back and see that nope. But we always find that we get reality smacking us in the face. We keep trying to get something for nothing, which but reality keeps smacking us in the face. Now. We also made the case for capitalism, which I think a lot of people right off the bat are probably, they don't like that. As a matter of fact, I told you this video I just put out, I got a lot of comments and, but capitalism has led to all these problems and capitalism has left all these people behind and but there's this misunderstanding. So we break that down in the book. And so I think that in itself is worth the read. But back to the something for nothing piece. So, as humans, and we make the case that capitalism is just natural. We're just trying to do more with less. So it is the human drive for something for nothing. Instead of making 10 trips carrying one brick at a time, how about if I just make a wheelbarrow and carry 10 bricks at once? And so we're always trying to get not necessarily something for nothing, but more for less. So I mean, are those two things almost the same, but one is just a little detached from reality? Well,
it is. And this is where wisdom and maturity come in, right? And this is where all of these tendencies, like even greed, for example, has a light and a shadow. If there's one thing I learned from reading Jung's work was that all of these examples of our personality and our desires and everything, like our energy, has a light and a shadow, and the question is, how are we manifesting it? The desire to get something for nothing is always going to exist. We are always trying to economize because, remember, time and energy are scarce. Like, material resources are scarce. Like we have a deep-seated spiritual, biological, it's in our DNA to try and use things more efficiently, down to the very bugs in the ground and the fishes in the sea. Like, everything is trying to economize somehow. It's what we do. The question is when we start lying to ourselves. So like there's a difference between an innovation that that uses leverage, like a pulley or a lever that uses leverage to give you an advantage in order to move more weight across space, for example, or power across time, etc. It's very different doing that than building a fake lever and pretending I moved something and then just writing on a piece of paper and telling someone I did it, because behind the scenes the work didn't actually occur. And that's sort of, there's a difference between a lie and an actual an increase in the efficient and the effective output of something. They both stem from the same desire, though.
Yeah. So it's that desire, but I love how you said it. It's about maturity. So we have to learn. Most of us have to learn as we grow up what is achievable, what we can really do, and what we can't do. And so we're always trying to do more with less, economize, as you said it, but then we also have to know where those bounds are and the difference of reality. So good point. You talked about four main thought ideas that we had in the book. Let's talk about a couple other ones. Like, why should people go get this book? What are a couple things they could get from this that might help them go talk to other people, have conversations, or see the world differently?
Yeah, I think the other big one was, you mentioned it already, capitalism. I think we have a very novel approach to defining capitalism. And what we did was, most people get stuck in the argument and the frame or the Overton window of trying to argue capitalism as a political modality. It's like capitalism is on the right and socialism is on the left. And we kind of came in there and just said, no. Capitalism is just the process. It's, if we define capital as the scarce stuff, so time, energy, and natural resources, and then if we sort of define metaphysical capital as like ideas and reputation, right? Like that, like these things, like the metaphysical stuff is not as scarce. Like, we can have as many ideas as we want, but there is something unique about them, like the way we put them together, etc. So if these are capitalism is about how best to use them, and the two forcing functions that we discuss in the book are efficacy and efficiency. It's like, so doing more with less and doing the right thing is what efficacy is. And if we think about capitalism through that lens, what we come to realize is that we've been doing this since the beginning of time. And I think we've said this on the show before, but capitalism is just, since we first realized that we needed to more efficiently acquire food, and we, created stone tools to like break food apart or to throw it at an animal and, cut down the amount of energy we use in chasing the animal. And someone else creates a fire, and if I've caught the animal and we share the animal and share the fire, etc., like there's division of labor. So like we're always doing this. The question is like, how do the political bounds that sit around the process of capitalism, like how much do they suffocate it? And we can kind of think of the political bounds as the bank of the river, and capitalism is the flow of the river. It's the flow of the energy. It's happening. Do we constrict it to the point that the river runs dry? And that's what you see in communist or centrally planned modalities, is that we trip over each other, creating all sorts of regulations because we haven't thought about where the wealth is actually coming from. And then we try and control it and direct it and shift the flow of the stream, and then all of a sudden we've destroyed the river and there's no more water flowing, and we're wondering, it's the fault of capitalism because there's no more water flowing here.
Yeah, we see examples of that. Bernie Sanders is, I'm running on a pro-socialist platform. I want to redistribute all the wealth, but yet, per the capitalist system, the book says he's become multimillionaire and owns all these houses. That's the capitalist system that he's talking against. Or AOC, who's still, pushing the socialist platform, tax the rich and, end capitalism, but yet she sells like T-shirts for $60 on her website or whatever, right? Like not just cheap T-shirts, like premium T-shirts. That's capitalism. And so, to your point, they push back on these things. They say we don't need these things, but they don't really understand how those things make this integral part. And I would agree. Just to get this understanding of capitalism as we laid out, I think is probably one of the most important lessons in the book. Because you really have to understand how the world works, and you have to understand the different types of capital, to your point, that we all have. Everybody has capital. And then how do we use those? And then how does that work in the greater ecosystem? And this is really, first principles type thinking that then you can start to formulate your own ideas off of, as opposed to just out there parroting headlines that you hear from Bernie Sanders. Another thing that I saw in all these comments this week, again, because I just made these videos about socialism and collectivism, but they would say, but those Scandinavian countries are socialist, and look how good they are. But all those Scandinavian countries tell you we are not socialist countries. They push back on that, and so I think you need to have that better understanding. In the book, we have a matrix, and so we actually have all the different forms of what people think capitalism is, whether that's cronyism or colonialism, or people say capitalism led to slavery. We have all of these different forms in there. And then we show really what capitalism is, what it is and what it isn't. And then we compare it against all these what we call phantom variations of capitalism. And I think just that lesson alone is worth the book on itself. And then if you get the book on Amazon, make sure to come back to our website, uncommunist.com. And then you can get access to a bunch of extra materials, behind-the-scenes commentary, discussions, download all the charts, graphs, etc., so much more. You're listening to The Mark Moss Show. We're talking about, of course, each and every week, the decentralized revolution, talking about the way Bitcoin is changing the world. I'm in the studio with Aleks Svetski, my co-author of the brand new book, The UnCommunist Manifesto, on Amazon. Check it out. And that's what we got. Thanks for listening today. Since you've stayed to the end, I know you like this video, which means you're probably going to really like this video right here and this video right here.